All right, welcome back, everybody. Once again, great to see everybody here. I truly do appreciate all of your support. If you are catching this live watching this on YouTube and you would like to be a part of the conversation, you can always catch us live 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Feel free to send us any topics, any jokes, any memes. We do have an email set up. It is placedinshelter@gmail.com. And then again, you can come into YouTube, any kind of comments that you leave, we try to monitor those daily as well. So without further ado, let's jump in to episode number 7. Can you believe that? We're on episode number 7 already. And today's episode is going to be called The Magic of Induction. And in this talk, we're going to go over 3 main features or 3 main topics. Number 1, why has induction become so popular? Section number 2 is going to be why some people are not on board with it or have some pushback against induction. And then last but not least, what makes Hatco's induction stand out against the crowd. So moving in, number 1, induction's really become popular because of the energy efficiency. So when we talk about energy efficiency, just think right off the bat, if I have a gas burner, that flame has to then hit the pan, and the pan then has to heat up, and then that's going to heat the food. So that's the biggest energy savings right there. But another energy savings that people don't think about is the amount of heat that's being put into the kitchen versus when you're using induction. When you're using induction, the pan itself becomes the element, and you have a lot less heat loss into the kitchen. So that's number 1 reason. Number 2, consistency. Rather than having to figure out where the hot spots are, figuring out which burner you like to use for different things, when it comes to induction, you're going to get the same consistent heating patterns and profiles every single time that you use it. And then last of all, but not least, is safety. Oftentimes when we talk about not having an open flame, there is something that's safer about that. You don't have to worry about as many fire hazards. Although, as we know, certain temperatures and grease will still combust. But there is an added benefit of not having an open flame. So those are all the major reasons why you're seeing induction really take off. And it's been large overseas for a long time, especially in Europe, but it's really starting to take off here in the States. Section number 2, why is it that some people push back? And I think the number 1 reason why is because you have chefs that are classically trained using flames and using standard 6-burner ranges. Okay, so I look at it like this. If somebody were to come along to you and say, when you're driving your car today, instead of just using your right foot for the gas and the brake, we've found that it's more efficient if you use your left foot for the brake and use your right foot for the gas. Therefore, you're not moving your foot back and forth. You're going to be more accurate, and you have some safety built in because you won't have the chance of accidentally pushing on the wrong pedal, not knowing where your foot was. And most people will look at you like, you're crazy. I don't drive like that. I drive with my right foot. Right foot does gas and brake. So when asking to use something outside of what they're traditionally trained on, it can cause that negative reaction where people aren't used to it and therefore push back against it. The second thing that people push back on is the not having an open flame. Oftentimes you'll have chefs that have particular tricks of the trade or things that they do, the way they tip the pan, the way they use the different burners. So they know a lot of secrets and tips that they're unfamiliar with when it comes to using induction, or in fact, perhaps may not be there. I'm not a classically trained chef, so I don't have all of those answers there. But some people will say that it is not cooking the same if I do not have an open flame. However, we do know a 3,600 watt induction unit will give us the equivalent of a 31,000 BTU burner. So you will be getting the same power that you would be getting out of that flame. And last but not least, some of the pushback we get is going to be the pans. I don't want to have to purchase all new pans. What you may not know is that your pan may already be induction ready. And a simple test that you can do is go ahead and grab a small magnet and see if it sticks to the pan. That's the easiest way to tell. You may not even have to replace some of your pans because they may already be made of a ferrous material that will allow it to work on the induction units. Moving into our last section, we are going to talk about the advantages of the Hatco induction unit because as we know, there is a full range of induction units available, from the very inexpensive to the very expensive. So what is Hatco doing differently than other companies? So number one, we have what's called a 124-degree ambient temperature rating. Now, if you remember these things, I'm going to tell you some stories, and I'm a car guy, so I'm going to talk about a few car stories, and some of you may have heard this before, but when I talk about ambient temperature, the easiest analogy I like to use is going to be your 0 to 60 time. If I were to tell you, or excuse me, your quarter mile time, if I were to tell you that my car ran a 10-second quarter mile, we wouldn't have to know which engine it had, what transmission, which tires, which exhaust. We would all at least agree that that is a fast car, and the components that make up that car are going to be very robust and very quality driven in order to get a 10-second car. That's the same thing here with an ambient temperature rating. The higher that rating, the more robust and the more competent your components are. So you're going to have much more success with that unit. For example, ours is at the top of the market right now at 124 degrees, but there are some that are rated as low as 92 degrees. And if you were to build these into a cabinet, there's a very good chance that that internal temperature in the cabinet, if you have 4 or 5 or 6 of these running, may end up becoming too hot. And then you have to find certain ways to vent it. And in fact, sometimes you would have to purchase an additional product, which is essentially a fan to cool down that area. So that's number one, ambient temperature. Number two, magnetic power system. Now, we all talk about pan sensing technology, and that's pretty much a standard on every unit across the board. It's not going to turn on if I put a spoon or my wedding ring. It's not going to turn on if it doesn't sense a pan. That's pretty standard. It's been around for a long time. But what sets ours apart is the power system itself. When a pan is placed on the unit, it will actually ping the pan to figure out what kind of material it is, and then therefore send out the right wavelength to get those molecules to vibrate faster. So what does that actually mean? Once again, I'm going to tell you a car story. This is about resonant frequency. So back when I was 16, would have been around 1998, my very first car was, yes indeed, a 1994 Geo Tracker. It looked just like this. That's not my car, but it could be identical. Turned out the car was absolutely terrible in the wintertime, but I tell you what, at 16 years old in the summer, with my Sony Explode deck and my 6x9s with the top down, I mean, it was California living, baby. But what I found with that car is that as you moved up in speed, as I got to around 58 miles an hour, the car would start to vibrate, including me. The entire car would vibrate. But as I moved up to 60 miles an hour, that went away. And as I slowed down to 55, that also went away. So it just so happened to be the road, the tires, the wind, everything in conjunction made a resonant frequency that caused the entire vehicle to vibrate. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're trying to find the best frequency to heat that pan up faster. And where that's a benefit to you and your customer is going to be faster heat up times and more accurate cooking. So that's number two. Number three, we have a fully sealed top with conformally coated boards. You'll hear a lot of people talk about the specialty of the glass. All glass, whether it's the most inexpensive to the most expensive, all have to pass the UL 197 test, which is a series of ball bearings and pan drops. So they all have to meet those requirements. Now, if those break and they don't have a seal underneath or conformally coated boards, you're going to have to replace the entire unit as opposed to possibly just replacing the glass. So that's number three. Number four, some of you have heard this before, our decibel volume, so adding to a room, according to the decibel scale, is adding a rustling leaf, okay? Now, some of you might say, well, that's hardly anything, and some of the competition is much higher in terms of maybe sounding like a blow dryer. And when you put these in the back of the house, that may not mean as much to you, but if you use these for display cooking and you put them in the front of the house, perhaps at an omelet station, the last thing you want is your customers having to yell over a hair dryer to let the chef know they want green peppers and onions as opposed to ham and cheese. So that's another big point there. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the low profile sleek design along with programmable controls, which give you multiple stages. Again, these topics could be covered in a Hatco school in an hour, hour and a half. So these are the main points I want you to remember. And with that, that's going to take us to our question and answer session. So let me stop sharing here for a second and pull up our chat. Once again, the easiest way to ask a question is to just scroll to the bottom of the screen where you see the chat button. And if you choose that, it will bring up the chat window. And then from there, you can enter in your question. So let's take a look here. Other than what's he smuggling in those cheeks? Who knows? He's probably got food in there. So perfect. Renee has a question here. For the built-in induction range, when should you add the trim ring? That all depends on the install that you have. It's going to depend on the material of the counter. It's going to depend on how you want that to look. The trim ring is going to give you that lip on the outside so it can sit in there. If you were to use a groove on the bottom so it has a place to sit where the feet are, you can then just use kind of a seal around the outside so you get away from the trim ring. I would say most of the time if we see that put into some sort of a fabrication like a stainless steel, you're going to see the trim ring. Oftentimes if somebody's putting that into a countertop that has some sort of stone or a decorative look to it, they're going to go away from the trim ring. And it all just depends on the installation itself. Great question. Any other questions on the induction side? Well, that's fantastic. And with that, oh wait, we got one more, Craig. Craig Leitz. Any thoughts on a round top drop-in unit? That's interesting because the unit itself, the hob is actually round. I haven't seen one in the market that I'm aware of. It doesn't mean there isn't one. I would think that the opportunity would have to be right. If the right customer was asking for something like that, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. However, what you may find is because the unit is built to hold all of the componentry as is, if you were to make it round, they wouldn't be able to just cram in the components in a smaller space. You may find that the round version of it is larger. One of the other drawbacks of doing that is you're only going to heat where the hob is located. So having the housing as small as possible around where the actual hob is will better suit your customer to make sure they don't put the pan in the wrong area. Great question. So the question was, our buffets have asked for them, so a round pan will work. I'm a little confused because the hob itself is round. Regardless of the shape of the pan, I could take a square skillet and put it on there. It's just going to heat the area that's directly under the hob, and then through residual, like contact, you know, conduction, if you will, that will then heat up the remainder of that unit. So that wavelength only goes about 1.5 inches above the hob itself. So even if you're using a stock pot, that bottom area is going to be what's really heated, and then the rest of it gets heated through natural conduction. Mark, is the Boxer as good as the other Hatco model? So with the Boxer unit that we have to offer, it is a price-conscious unit, and it does have a lot of the same features. But what we've done with that is taken out some of the heavy dutiness. We took out some of the side stainless that holds it in place, like you would see on the heavy duty units. And what we've done is remove the programmability. So it becomes just a more basic unit. The internal guts and the internal componentry of what you're getting is going to be very similar, but you're going to lose a lot of the programmability in the higher end stuff. Carol, what is the status of the ventless unit? I am not sure I know exactly what you mean by that. So the units themselves will never truly be ventless unless you're able to put some sort of ventless hood above them. And the reason for that is anytime that you're able to bring it to temperatures that will cause grease latent vapors to get in the air, you're never going to be able to get that passed without having some sort of hood above it. So you are going to need something like a ventless hood option. If you're referring to the ventless option that you saw a couple years ago when we had coming soon products, there is something that's in the works, but I don't think that's anytime soon. I don't know how far off that is, if that's what you're referring. To cover so the customer does not see. So Craig, if you're talking about similar to another competitor where you actually have the hob built under the stone, and then you use a trivet, which would then keep the pan or the pot off of the stone for warming, that we have, and we're working on that as well. It's like a wish sandwich, have 2 slices of bread and wish, and I had something to put it in. All right, Brad, warranty, knowing it's a Hatco and I'll never need it, but just thought I'd ask, is the warranty similar to the competition? We actually offer a 2-year replacement on our unit. So if you're familiar with the TPT warranty, we do a replacement. So rather than having to worry about sending that unit in, because oftentimes you aren't going to be able to have somebody come out and service that because they're going to say it's a small product, we need you to send it in. We will do a replacement on that as well. Carol, yes, confirmation, that's what you were referring to. So Carol was referring to, we had a few years ago, there was a coming soon, and we had a ventless display hood that would go over the induction units to give you a much cleaner look. So when you do your display cooking, you're not being blocked by any kind of vents. It's something that was taken off. There's a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through in terms of how to properly vent that so that we can pass all UL and NSF certifications. So I know it was tabled for a little while because it's become much more complicated than we originally thought, but that doesn't mean it's gone away. It just means that they are working on it further. So you won't see it in that brochure for a while. Richard, I would also add, beyond the power offered by Induction, I would add Induction's better based on the precision it offers. It's tempering chocolate without scorching. That's a great point. So typically if you were to use any kind of a gas burner, or even an electric stove at home, you would have to use a double boiler system because otherwise you would burn the chocolate. However, with our induction unit, you can drop it down to 92 degrees, and with that precision, that consistency that we talked about, you will be able to melt the chocolate without having to utilize a double boiler. And in fact, if you've been to the Hatco school, you'll see that Edward oftentimes will have either chocolate covered strawberries or some sort of a lemon type concoction that's made with white chocolate. That also does really well, and you don't need to do anything else other than dial it down to a particular temperature. So great questions, everybody. It took a minute to get it going, but that was great. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again, and we're going to get into some people's favorite part, and that's going to be our memes of the day. Once again, if you have a great meme you want to send to me, placedinshelter@gmail.com. If yours gets chosen, we'll give you a shout out like we gave to Deanna a couple of days ago. But without further ado, this is me after washing my hands for 20 seconds, 57 times in one day. Thought that was pretty good. And then here's one. Everything I want to do is illegal right now. And last but not least, the international symbol for maybe I'll make 2 sandwiches. I'm not sure yet. And I am 100% guilty of this, and my wife doesn't understand it. She's not a fan, so, but I totally relate to this one. That's me. I always might make another sandwich, so. And with that, we're gonna wrap up episode number 7. Once again, thank you everybody for joining in. Your participation here is absolutely appreciated more than you'll know. Again, if you're joining us on YouTube, you can always catch us live 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. And as always, to show us that you're liking the content, like, share, subscribe to the YouTube video. Also, if you are subscribed, make sure you hit the bell notification down here, and that'll let you know every time that we post a new video. So thanks everybody, and have a wonderful day.